I think people feel safer on the internet. So the internet creates a safe haven and a sort of safe space for you to congregate without the threat of physical violence, without the threat of being outed. Like when you're on the internet, you can cultivate your online identity and you could sort of release as much information as you want to, and you could withhold as much information as you want to. So that way it's really easy to find other LGBT people. And that's actually how our organization was started, because we started an online group for LGBT students at UWI. Okay. And so many people started joining online, because it was a safe space. It was a secret group, and we actually grew to a national platform because so many people would started joining the group and asked for physical space to come out of it. And so many people that didn't even go to UWI, and they just, felt safe in that space. So we're like, okay, wow. So the internet was actually the plateau off of which our organization actually started.
Because of the ease in which the internet allows you to connect, I am able to connect with other people who are working on these issues as well. Other people who are working on things like gender-based violence, that specific type of violence perpetrated against women and girls because they are women and girls. The violence against women and girls because of their gender. So people working in those areas, like in women's political participation, ensuring that women are right there alongside men, able to make decisions, able to participate in the governance of the country. Women and men who are working on issues like sexual and reproductive health and rights, we are able to communicate with each other, to keep in contact, to tell each other about advocacy, etc. And I think the internet as a space with people sharing articles and talking about racism and talking about sexism, especially because of the kind of global political landscape where you have some figures becoming really popular who are openly sexist and misogynistic and racist, that the conversation is there. So the internet and social media can really create a climate where these conversations are had and these discussions are had, and people feel comfortable saying their piece and talking about violence or discrimination they have experienced. So then we had in the Caribbean the Life in Leggings movement, and on a global scale we had Me Too and Time's Up, and that used social media to create a climate where women felt comfortable coming out and talking about the suffering and abuses that they have experienced. So that is the positive side of it. But whenever there is a change or a push towards change, there is also the backlash as well. There are people who are quite happy with the status quo, who have the privilege and they want to keep it that way. They're not in support of women being equal to men or people being regarded as equal regardless of their race. They want the old oppressive structures to be in place, and they too use the internet to peddle their message of hate and to peddle their sexism and misogyny. So yes, it does give a platform for people who are fighting for social change and justice to connect, but there's also a platform for the people who want sexism to be the standard and who want women to be okay with being sexually harassed at work. They're out there too.
We had a lot of discussions with Noah in terms of understanding their vision of this thing. It was pretty large. We had to work with them to narrow it just a bit, because ultimately the focus was, how do we illuminate this issue that is definitely a critical social ill, but persons are, blissfully unaware, or those who are impacted are impacted so negatively, and yet there's so very little that's being done to support them. So we discussed a lot with Noah, and we came up with some critical objectives that we thought would be useful for this exercise. And that's really how the research kind of had its genesis. How it was conducted was, we actually did a national survey. So we segmented the entire island, all 11 parishes. We looked at what we consider as enumeration districts. So these enumeration districts are basically boundary lines that segment every neighborhood and community. And we would have done a random sample for those. And then we also did very high traffic areas. So we did Bridgetown, Oistins, Spicetown, Whole Town. We looked at a number of the malls, Sheraton Mall, and a number of these other ones that allowed for us to really have this, representative set of data that speaks to this issue of online abuse and harassment. One of the key objectives was looking at first the prevalence of online abuse and harassment, and we looked at all dimensions of harassment. So we looked at bullying, we looked at revenge porn, we looked at cyber stalking, a number of these other ones that were critical. And so for us, we thought that was one of the first things, the prevalence. Then we also went on to look at whether this thing disproportionately affects women and girls as opposed to men. Generally, in more than 80% of the incidences where a person had received or sent a video which contained a presence of a person who has not given you the permission to share this, in 80% of those cases, a female was involved, whether she was alone or whether she was with a companion.
When it happens to LGBT people, the focus on the main point of really releasing that porn and getting it spread around is to out a person. So whenever porn is sort of spread around like that, it's meant to shame somebody by outing them. Usually the person is not out. It's usually somebody who might be in a relationship with a wife perhaps, and they're cheating on that wife with a man, and they had an intimate moment that was recorded, but it's usually about outing. That's what it's about, shaming somebody and having their sexual orientation sort of publicly shared around, and it usually happens to men. We hardly ever see instances of outing via like revenge porn. We hardly ever see it happen to women. I saw it happen in one case before, and I mean it does happen, but I think 90% of the cases are about men being publicly shamed and outed because they are gay or bisexual.
As for the backlash, that's the funny thing, the backlash isn't always overt, as in someone would not necessarily come on a post or come on the Walking Into Walls page, even though there are some people who have come on the Walking Into Walls page in the wake of a horrific murder or beating of a woman at the hands of her intimate partner and said sexist things and attempted to blame the victim. So that does happen, but I find the backlash is this more subtle, insidious type of conversation where there is an attempt to discredit the victim, to discredit the survivor, to so-called play devil's advocate, but you can tell it is really about silencing the women who are talking, detracting from what they're saying, derailing the conversation, quieting women's voices when they're speaking up about their experiences. So that is where I find the backlash.
Right, now generally in our survey, our sample, was about 650 persons. Of those 650 persons, only 4 of them reported having gone to the police to report their incident, right? And of those 4, most of them were very dissatisfied with the process. It's only 4 persons, but what it says to you is this is something that we need to address. Many of the persons who were asked hypothetically if they had been a victim, would they report it? Many of them said no, they wouldn't. They just felt like there would be no justice.
People need to take online harassment seriously, because I think a lot of the time people are really flippant about it and they're like, it's just online fodder, but that has the potential to grow and affect you in real life. Not that online is in real life, but it has the potential to affect you offline, because if someone has the guts to be able to go after you and harass you and stalk you online, they very do well have the potential to take that offline, and has the potential to escalate, because it did happen to me at a point in 2015 where we were doing a lot of visible and a lot of public work. I would face a lot of online harassment and a lot of online attacks, and I did, I ignored it. But there was a guy who worked in a supermarket right near to my house, because I lived on the West Coast, so I lived within walking distance of a supermarket, and he would see me online. He found me on Facebook. He would see me tagged in different articles, and then when I saw him in person, he would be so upset. He's like, I can't believe that you're involved in this stuff. I can't believe that this is who you are. And, I started ignoring him in person, but he found means and ways to harass me online. He created a lot of different profiles. He found me on all of my social media accounts. He even found me on Snapchat, just all different means and ways and avenues to harass me when I clearly wasn't interested. And it escalated to the point that he broke into my house one day. And the person left a note that said, "Burn in hell, Wicca." And they left that like in my living room by the front door. And I figured out that it was him because when that happened, I posted it online to let people know. And he was laughing about it. He was like, "Yeah, you see, this is what you get," and all of this stuff. It eventually didn't go anywhere. I mean,
Did you go to the police?
I went to the police, and when they came, they really focused on whether or not I was a lesbian. That's a lot. That's a lot of the questions they had to ask me. So, are you a Wicca? And I was just like, what does this have to do with the fact that my house is broken into? Yeah, they asked me if I left the door unlocked, and I'm like, no, I didn't. That was by far the most intrusive. But they tend to happen at points in time when there's a lot of conversation about the LGBT community online. So when the nation publishes a lot of stuff online about the LGBT community and gets people really incited and stuff, I see people offline and in physical space, and they're like, I saw you on the internet talking about the gays, and I think that y'all should burn in hell, and all of this stuff. And yeah, people get a lot of, I think they get pent up when they see all of this stuff online. They get all this pent up rage, and then when they see you in person, they don't feel any way about bringing it to you. So I don't think harassment in a digital space should be taken any less likely than it is in a physical space, because it could very well manifest physically.
In Barbados, generally our suicide rate is low, so it's tough to say that it will necessarily lead to an immediate increase. What I can say is that the contributing factors of online abuse or harassment it's a bombardment of the activity. It tends not to be a one-off. There are hundreds of thousands of shares. There are, it is a constant kind of barrage of activity, and it has a great chance of increasing that. I think we've seen recently in Barbados, they had about 2 suicides of teenagers. And a large part of it was that they had fallen out of their social groupings. Much of that is associated with their online spaces. You see lots of teachers are now reporting that there's a lot of physical violence and fighting in schools, and the incidences originate in the online space. So, I don't want to say it will lead to increasing suicide, but the ramifications are clear.
As Facebook became more popular and the inequalities in the world became more stark, we know what the global political climate looks like right now. So the inequalities became more stark, and all those lynching of black bodies in the US, etc. There's more of that. There's more conversation, more of that happening. And so I would say that on my Facebook page, I don't know about other people's timelines, but the people that I interact with most on Facebook, they tend to be supportive of conversations about racism and about gender. And there aren't many people on my Facebook page and in my Facebook group, my timeline, I don't know what we want to call it, that are out there pushing very harsh, hateful messages. So I think overall it has created an opportunity for really great discussion and raising of awareness, and people will comment and talk about having had their eyes open or not recognizing that the racism was so bad or the sexism was so horrible. So I'd say that that is the area of it that has been really supportive, just the creation of this space where people are free to share memes and articles and jokes and posts that remind us that as people in Barbados, a former colony, that the racism is alive and well and the sexism is alive and well, and we can support each other in raising awareness and standing against it.